for that coverage, Holy Spirit coverage, and every leadership, we bring it in your hands. Yes, Father, in the mighty name of Jesus, I thank you for the day. Let glory and honor be unto you. In Jesus' name, amen.
Thank you, Reverend. Sorry, while we're still on our feet, we're going to sing the national anthem of Zimbabwe. If the media team can just assist us with an electronic version of the Gro stand for the national anthem, and then we'll get into the business of the day. If we could all take our seats. There's certain people that I couldn't hear singing. I won't point to anyone. Members of the National Standing Committee, National Executive Members, Members of Parliament, Councillors of the City of Harare, Provincial Executive Members, District Executive Officers, Ward Chairpersons, Provincial Chairpersons, members of the Diplomatic Corps. We'd like to welcome everybody to the Movement for Democratic Change's roadmap to economic recovery, legitimacy, openness, and democracy. The launch of Reload, which is the party's policy document. How many people are excited about that? How many people know that the MDC is a government in waiting? How many of you are ready to govern? How many of you are ready to understand what the policy direction of the party is? So with all of that in mind, we're going to talk today. I think Zimbabwe is at a crossroads. We all agree that mediocrity has been our name. We struggle for electricity, we're struggling for water, we're struggling for the most basic things, and we cannot continue like that. And it's constantly said by the party's leadership that we are a party of excellence. So not only are we going to exercise our constitutional rights in holding the government to account, but we are in the business as well of alternative policy formulation. So that is what the business of today is. Now, before we go into the meat and substance of what the program has to offer today, we'd just like to take a moment to acknowledge two of our cadres who have been, we say, wrongfully arrested and are about to be the subject of a malicious prosecution, Job Sikala and Gift Siziba. Some party members have gone ahead and are standing with them in solidarity, but we just want to keep them in mind. And if anything, what's going on with them reminds us why the fight for democracy and freedom is so important. Why it's so important that we do have a party that's a strong opposition, that does stand for constitutionalism, that does stand for free speech and free expression, that does acknowledge and take advantage of its right under Section 67 to challenge the government, to hold it to account, and to ensure that Zimbabwe does get what it deserves in terms of freedom, in terms of fairness, and in terms of opportunity. So without further ado, There are people who've been in the struggle for democracy a whole lot longer than some of us, people who are aging in the struggle. Brian Kagoro is definitely one of the voices of principle we've had over the years, the decades, did I say, while I was still in high school. Brian was in the forefront of chasing constitutionalism and the hope and aspiration of a better Zimbabwe. So I'm going to ask Brian Kagoro for the next 20 minutes to talk to us about the nature of the Zimbabwean crisis. And this is important because our policy document is going to speak to or answer and provide solutions to what that crisis is. So it's important for us to have some clear definition of that. So Brian, or everyone, join me in a wild round of applause for Brian Kagoro as he comes up. Thank you. Maybe before he does. All right. So slight change in program. We've advised that the president is on his way. So while we wait for him, we're just going to take a brief musical interlude. And as soon as he arrives, we're going to get into Brian Kagoro's presentation. So please bear with us. He's on his way. And if the media team may just assist us with a brief musical interlude, and then we'll get into the business. Thank you.
Vamos, honorable Machakana.
Right, we'd like to obviously acknowledge the arrival of our President, Advocate Nelson Chamisa, our Vice President, Honorable Tendai BT, our Secretary General, Deputy Secretary General, members of the Standing Committee who are here. Without further ado, I'm going to call upon Brian Kagoro to come and talk to us about the state of the nation currently and a summary of the national crisis which our reload policy aims to address. Let's give Brian a round of applause. Brian, I'm giving you 20 minutes, please.
Bamsorwe utungamiri we MDC uripano, President Nelson Chamisa, the Presidium, and SG, members of the Diplomatic Corps, members of the press, comrades from civil society, ladies and gentlemen. I had been given a lot more time, but when you deal with an advocate, you have to be careful. I wanted to start off by suggesting to you something that many people don't look at anymore, which is the fact that the national crisis we are describing is not just a crisis of legitimacy, it's not just a crisis of governance, it's not just a crisis of perception, but it's a crisis of two things. Allow me to take off my hat. It's a crisis, number one. It's a crisis of imagination. The reason why it is a crisis of imagination is because we have run this country on the basis of memory for a long time and not had an opportunity to think about what it will take to move forward. When I was told yesterday that I would have to be a replacement of an eminent professor, I quickly looked for this policy document. It is called Growth with Equity, an Economic Policy Statement, February 1981. And the document says that it seeks to do the following, or it diagnosed the problem as the following: to undertake a vigorous program for development of the country and to pursue and implement policies based on socialist, egalitarian, and democratic principles in condition of rapid economic growth, full employment, price stability, dynamic efficiency in resource allocation. And then it looks at the history of economic exploitation, the grossly uneven structural and productive development of the rural and urban economy, and it looks at various other things. But the document set as its objectives to establish a society founded on democratic and egalitarian principles, which are inherent in policies and measures, to achieve a sustained high rate of economic growth and speedy development in order to raise incomes and standards of living, to develop and restructure the economy in ways which promote rural development and desired changes in the patterns of consumption, technology, exports, and in ways consistent with the most desirable use and conservation of natural resources and the environment, and to end imperialist exploitation and achieve greater and more equitable degree of ownership of natural resources, including land, promote participation in and ownership of a significant portion of the economy by nationals and the state, create and maintain high levels of employment for Zimbabweans in all sectors and at all levels of skill and responsibility, and redress the historical racial imbalance in skilled employment. I could go on. Does this look like we have not progressed from this very day in 1981? To a large extent, it may be. There was a tension in that first economic blueprint, and that tension was twofold, and that tension faces Zimbabwe today. It was a tension between continuity and change. The continuity of capitalist growth versus the aspirations for what was then deemed socialist equity. The question was whether to level up and approximate white lifestyles, which at the time, per capita income, at one time, they were only matched by Hollywood celebrities. That means people who lived in White Rhodesia, White Rhodesians had a very high standard of living. So we chose to level up. When we leveled up, that meant that we deracialized. In deracializing, people went into white schools, people went into white suburbs and white residences. When we did this, we didn't address 4 things that remain a haunting factor in our development. Rural micro-enterprise development remained unaddressed. We did not in any significant and meaningful way address the labor question, the factory question. We did not in any way address the technology question. So we mass produced very intelligent people who spoke good English, but we did not enter the race technologically, where we would make our personnel not only globally competitive in terms of literacy, but locally productive. But the luxury of 1981, which we don't currently have, is that there was ZIMCOD, which was a pledge made in March for $800 million. And part of that money was given to the private sector, and the private sector at the time was starved of forex, almost similar to now. And some of it was spent on infrastructure rehabilitation and some of it in building new infrastructure. Hence, in the first 10 years, you see a number of high schools, you see a number of clinics and facilities that were built. Why am I looking at this historical period? It was a period characterized by social mobility. So you could literally gauge the plight and condition of workers in 1978 and the minimal progress made in the first 10 years. But Bernard Chidzero, Herbert Murerwa, Simba Makoni, Chamisa, Tendai Biti, and every minister of finance since then has always had in the budget statement a statement to the effect that we are living way beyond our means. And it is important to look at when the workers in this country started realizing that the consumption happening amongst bureaucrats in the state had nothing to do with benefit to the common man. The labor strikes from 1988, when Shangrai was charged with treason for supporting workers, students who were condemning corruption. 1991, 1992, up to 1996, when workers were protesting against ESAP, the Economic Structural Adjustment Program. It is a program that was designed to bring reform, to try and ensure that we live within our means, but a program that manufactured a structural crisis in the economy. We were still struggling with deracialization and transition from a minority-owned economy. Now we had entered into an economy which was hostile to blacks, but hostile to black workers and peasants, hostile to black graduates in particular. At the University of Zimbabwe, students started protesting against the policies that had been adopted in 1990-91. And you are familiar with how those protests and those movements of workers and students led to the foundation of this party. And this foundation of this party was in the context where in 1997 we had gone into an expensive war in the Congo. We now learned from UN reports that that war produced mega millionaires from people who, although the country was paying $2 million a day, they were looting perhaps the equivalent and lining their pockets. In that same context, we soon thereafter entered into a fast-track land reform program. Now, land reform was very necessary and remains necessary. But what happened with the fast-track land reform program is that it is black workers. Gapuz tells us that there were more than 500,000 workers on the farms, and of the 500,000 workers, over 85% were displaced. They were rendered destitute. That question has not been addressed by any government since then. The rendering destitute of workers, which means a dimension of the crisis of an economy which had been designed to serve a minority white, which was now still serving a minority, this time of a mixed race nature, had become not only non-beneficial to the majority, but the economy had become hostile to the poor. And the poor had no one else but themselves to defend their right to live, their right to life, and their right to livelihood. Yet there was fast-track land reform in which very few poor people benefit. Yes, a lot of people who are not rich benefit. And some members within the opposition and civil society benefit. Afterwards, we entered into an indigenization program. The indigenization program continued to benefit an elite, continued to talk of an economics of growth without equity, growth without inclusion, growth without improving the plight of workers and the plight of the unemployed. A lot shall be said about the coup, and I will speak about the militarization of the state. So what is the national crisis? Because depending on which newspaper you are reading and which intellectual you are talking to, depending on whether you choose to stylize and characterize people as stooges of imperialism or stipendiaries of a militarized junta, whichever narrative you want, there is one thing we agreed on, that when the lights go off in Zesa, it does not matter which political party card you carry, we are all in darkness. Right. And when money is stolen from the public purse, it doesn't matter which card you carry of a political party. When you go to a hospital, you will not find medication. You will be forced to pay for basic services. Yet the elite can take from your taxes and go and get treatment in India and South Africa and even go in expensive jets. And this creates the impression to the ordinary person that the fight for power is a fight for survival. And therefore people no longer see the contest of democracy as one about running the state and making sure that it distributes benefit, income, and outputs of development to everyone. But the state is now seen not only as a site of accumulation, but as a site of survival for a clique. We are not here to talk about economic policies simply to redress the ethical dimensions of excessive consumption. The nature of the crisis, my friends, is one where the economic environment is uncertain and not long-term based, and it is unsustainable. And ourselves are run by a state which is weak and not developmental in orientation. Our communities are fragmented. Now, instead of talking about the common Zimbabwean identity, every single group is splintering into another small group. Now, there's nothing wrong with your ethnic background, but when ethnicity becomes the sole premise in the midst of such a Herculean task of reconstructing the nation, reconstructing the state, and ensuring that we catch up with the 50 years we have lost in development, it seems to me unfortunate that we localize both perception and localize the problem and localize and turn each other into the sole problem. It does not matter who runs the state if the structure of the economy is not geared to ensure that workers are primary, the unemployed are primary, that women are primary. We will have an economy registering 7% growth and a poverty registering 45% debt. So I want to suggest to you that the crisis we face is that not only is our economy in a country that is rich in natural resources donor dependent and aid dependent. What is clear to us is that the nature of the crisis is because of poor imagination. We now auction our natural resources for a song. We sell off critical national assets under the guise of investment. We do not have any particularly meaningful engagement process with the diaspora. When we talk about the diaspora, we talk about a meeting in one or other location where we make grand processes. Even the policy on diaspora engagement and the vehicle for engaging the diaspora remains incomplete. And yet we know that in terms of capital base, that diaspora could easily give us close to $900 million. That would be critical for a portion of our recovery. But why don't the diaspora or diasporans give money to their country? Is it because they are unpatriotic, that they are so comfortable in the hamburger eating in the centers where they have gone either as economic exiles or exile? No. It is because they have no trust in the system of government. They have no trust in those who are running the state. They have no trust in the predatory elite. And therefore, there is a crisis of ethics and a crisis of governance in our country. Our society is deeply unequal. And part of the inequality in our society is a crisis not only of governance, but of power. How power is transacted in the private space, how power is dealt with in the public space, how power is dealt with in the economy. But that crisis of power is linked to how we have conflated the party, ZANU-PF, the state of Zimbabwe, the military, the economy, such that when we're talking about the economy, there is no policy being made that is not linked to interests of a particular elite in the state. Until we can decouple the embeddedness of the elite, whether that elite is MDC, ZANU-PF or civil society, from the economy and move again towards egalitarian objectives, we are tinkering on the edges. It's a beauty contest of bullfrogs. Ladies and gentlemen, we are faced with a crisis. We have a weak and dysfunctional state. When we started politicizing the public service, in essence, we created the very power station for corruption in our nation. The idea that the civil service, the public service, which is meant to be a professional administration, is manned by persons who are party apparatchiks, essentially means that they make their decisions based on body language of the political elite, not on merit, not on the substantive requirements of decision making. Until we depoliticize the public service and public administration, it is difficult to professionalize it, it is difficult to deal with the ethical questions, and it is difficult to deal with the competency questions, because there are certain people you can't fire, because firing them if they are senior in the party means you are causing factionalism and rumptions in the party, whatever that party is. But we are not spared ourselves as those who have fought for democracy. I come here with a heavy heart, and I know that this leadership is committed to addressing it. It is unacceptable that fighting for years, and for my brother Morgan Tsvangirai dying, still fighting, for Chiminya and others dying at the hands of a brutal regime, we should have our comrades get into local councils and loot and become land barons. No, no, no. We cannot have that. Friends, we ourselves have become very intolerant. We have become intolerant of people who hold different views, intolerant of people who criticize us. So, when we say Chamisa, there will be neromania or nerophobia. When we say somebody else, there can never be an objective analysis of the leadership imperative of the moment. As Zimbabweans, we have become accomplices in our own destruction until we say that this is the requirement of all leadership, whatever its pedigree, that leadership that does not align with these values. And if you are in this party, it is social democratic values. And if those social democratic values are not in any policy, it cannot be your policy. If social democratic behaviors are not in any leadership, it cannot be your leadership. Otherwise, the space will be captured by boys and girls with money. So I want to then say to us, the first challenge we face is that we must safeguard the ability to create a productive economy. In creating a productive economy, we need both distributive and redistributive policies. We need to deal with systems of taxation that take care of the following. There are women who are sitting in this room who have, without being paid anything by the state, played the role of caregiver to persons living with HIV and AIDS, to orphans in community. And that money that was meant for social protection for orphans, it's getting into the pockets of bureaucrats buying expensive cars, and they claim they are buying fuel which never arrives. Our economy must be a solidarity economy. It must be a care economy. It must be an economy with a human face. Otherwise, growth figures without any human element to it essentially mean the following. We are attractive to foreign investors and we are not meaningful and beneficial to our own citizens. So, I am looking for a day when this space, which is not ruling party or which is government in waiting or next government, begins to talk about what does indigenization of the economy from a social democratic perspective mean? Because the economy cannot be owned by foreigners. We may be as a generation comfortable with it, but we will have our own malemas and a generation of young people who begin to say, yes, we hold the green passports and we are citizens, but when it comes to the economy, we are outsiders. Trima Roja, we are outsiders. There must be some form of nationalism that informs our Pan-Africanism. And that nationalism says we welcome investment, but that investment must not produce out of our workers, produce out of our communities, paupers and spoiled and damaged environments and polluted air and polluted water. But it must produce amongst our people the capacity to reproduce life, the capacity to reproduce prosperity. We have an education. We want to apply it. The governance context has not allowed us to. And what we want is the opportunity. We don't want freebies. We are not beggars. And that is an important starting point for a social democratic party. We are creating an economy in which everyone can participate and a politics in which everyone can participate. I want to suggest that the crisis of militarization must be seen together with the current crisis of militarism. Why is that important? Militarization is soldiers embedded in public administration, soldiers in the economy, soldiers even soldiers everywhere. As Peter Tosh should have said, Babylon man everywhere. Right? It is important for us to say that the military must be appreciated as a critical component of any democratic society when it comes to defending the interests of Zimbabwe. But the military must not be over-essentialized as the sole arm for doing economics, for doing politics. Because at some stage, society will get militarized. Because people will begin to believe, erroneously, that without resorting to violence or to militarism, you are unable to negotiate space and place in the economy and society. So let me prepare to land. The problem of Rhodesia, Mr. President, was twofold. In fact, three. It was the refusal of white settlers to accept universal adult suffrage. It was racial segregation of society. And the structural economic challenges characterized by enclavity within, let's say, natural resource extraction. The militarization of natural resource extraction and its confinement to a minority. The problem of Zimbabwe is akin to the problem of Rhodesia. We have deracialized, but it is the refusal of a black, militarized minority to accept universal adult suffrage and segregation of society on the basis of ethnicity, on the basis of political affiliation. It is a structural economic challenge, and I dare say it is not true that each time there's a Zimbabwean problem we say IMF. IMF used to be Zimbabwe's fault, now it's Mnangagwa's fault. I don't know what it will be when it's Chamisa. Right? The problems of our economy I've sought to demonstrate are linked to our vision of the economic development pathway. I've also sought to demonstrate that they are structural and historical in nature. And I've sought to demonstrate that our poor governance, our exclusive governance, our conflation of the military or securocracy, the economy and the state has essentially meant that we are unable to harvest the best of our resources in order to get the best results out of our economy. Let me say to you, colleagues, the world does not owe Zimbabwe a levy. There is something that we inherited from Rhodesia. It was called Rhodesian exceptionalism. It is this Zimbabwean exceptionalism that suggests that everything stands or falls on what happens in Zimbabwe. For goodness sake, I work across the continent. There is Sudan, there is Burundi, there is Central African Republic, there is South Sudan. There are many other places where the world has bigger strategic interests. What do we owe ourselves? We owe ourselves to move from this mutually destructive political impasse to a reform of the state that is comprehensive, to a reform of governance that's comprehensive, a reform of the economy that's comprehensive. But we can't get to that if we are polarized even in civil society. We've formed ourselves into cliques and little tribes. We've formed ourselves into unviable entities to contest both our local domineering forces and the global forces that have interest in Zimbabwe. As we fight over petty matters, there are others from outside our borders who have designs on our state. Those designs are not always good designs. Our insecurity is not just that which we see from unemployed youth who've been militarized, or party youths who've been given drugs or alcohol, or soldiers who have gone rogue. Our insecurity for the next 10 to 20 years arises out of the fact that there are forces and factors on this continent that have realized that Africa is the last frontier, where the natural resources remain unexploited fully, where the land remains unexploited fully. And as we fight, somebody is going to exploit. When we're done fighting, there will be nothing left for ourselves. The poor cannot eat indignation and anger. The business of the national crisis is the lack of alternatives. I was told, and I mean no offense to anybody who's white, that the government, in trying to mend its battered international image, has started parceling out land to the whites, and the European colleagues and others have begun to support this. But I have not heard anyone talking about the 500,000 farm workers. Is it because black lives, African lives, workers' lives don't matter? If the issue is to do justice for something that happened in that period during the fast-track land reform program, more black workers died. Nobody's talking about compensating their families. They lost. For a black worker with a little hut, mud hut, to be burnt and destroyed is a loss. He had no passport, he had no money to go elsewhere. Our colleagues, the farmers, were able to go to Zambia and farm. Those workers are milling around as vendors, being arrested every day, being harassed every day. The ones who tried cross-border trading are being harassed by xenophobia in South Africa. The ones who tried... The existence of our people must be primary to anybody wanting to assist our country. Must keep in mind, if the majority remain a minority in terms of the lens of recovery, this country will be back in crisis much bigger than we see now. So the issue is not whether or not to do compensation. The issue is, what are we compensating? I asked the minister a question. I said, farmers were heavily borrowed from banks. When you took the farms, the loans that they had were cancelled off. Right? Who incurred that debt? So let me end by saying the following. The first crisis we face is a crisis of citizenship. We have to decide that we are Zimbabwean citizens. In deciding that we are Zimbabwean citizens, we have to look at all the things we've been deprived and ask, why are we deprived of them? Electricity, water, quality education, quality health, quality roads, quality. And then we have to ask, who has deprived us of these things and why? The second crisis is a crisis of leadership perception. It seems to me, colleagues, that we move from leadership by a gerontocratic class. That means those guys who are very old. Oh, no. I'm just being corrected here by the president that you don't believe in discriminating on the basis of age. There's a Ugandan comedian who said yesterday the last president was 95, the new one is 89. I think he was wrong. He says basically Zimbabwe is being run by its ancestors. You know. I mean, I don't subscribe to those views. Any of you whose parents are above 70, you will know the nature of the national crisis. They are very good and wise and significantly slow and established. They are set in their ways like concrete, unable to change. And if they say change, it is on their terms. So that crisis of leadership is not just the age of leadership, it's the age of the ideas of leadership. We are not investing enough in technology, in blockchain technology. We are not investing to take our economy into the future. We are still dealing with the basic business of getting Panadol and aspirin in our hospitals. I think we need a leadership whose ideas and ideology is younger and more forward-looking. From the crisis of citizenship and leadership, we have a crisis of institutions, Advocate Mayer. I am glad that the institution I'm addressing today is addressing the institutional challenge. Over the last 20 to 38 years of crisis, we have cannibalized every institution. And as a result, power personalities, it is hollow. There's nothing that holds anything together. A ministry is held together by one good permanent secretary, maybe and half a director, right? A civil society group is held together by one founder leader and maybe a quarter, so and so. Until we rebuild institutions, the vehicle for doing economic reform does not exist. Because brilliance that is not institutionalized and coordinated can easily be dispersed and divided. The business of an alternative is alternative ideas, but alternative institutional forms. The crisis of previous institutions, it took too long for expertise to rise up the ladder. The imagination required in this moment is how do we get younger people into the civil service? How do we get their expertise into the civil service so that we move from analog to the digital age and try and catch up with leapfrog and get into the fourth industrial revolution? So for those donors who are only supporting entrepreneurship, I would say also support entrepreneurialism, which means make public servants entrepreneurial. Make sure young people are willing to serve. Not everyone wants to be a businessman and make money like some of my colleagues here. But there are people who have a commitment to serve. Until we create a public service that's depoliticized, based on merit, where the human resource planning and policy architecture enables people to rise up the ladder on the basis of what they can deliver and not the longevity they have stayed in a party, then we're not yet ready to reform. Finally, it is a crisis of social cohesion. My friends, Karanga on Debele is not a paid job. That's why it has not won you tokens for electricity. Being Zezuru Kore is not an employment pack. It is an identity of which you must be proud. But in constructing a country that must compete with the United States of America, with China and Japan, if we do it solely on the basis of Mtupoedu, you'll get to a place where there's no mofu. I mean, I've been to Wall Street, I've been to many other corridors where even with my big mtupo, they ask me a simple question, so what is your expertise? I said, no, I went to the University of so-and-so and the University of such and such. Degrees are not experience and expertise. Degrees don't run countries. We must be here to get our people educated, but to give them experience and expertise, and to give them exposure to reconstruct our education and our health system. Not only do we require patriotism, we require expertise, we require experience. I hope in the many words I've been able to say, the first crisis our country faces is yourself. Until you can imagine that poverty is not a gift from God, and that although there is a belief that God has assigned of us, all of us, our portion. Those of us with pot bellies, we are blessed. Those of you with the lean structure, drought, and those of you with bald heads, you are in a place of recession. I don't know. And those of you with thick beards, you are at a place of confusion. Right? God is not the author of our national stagnation. Our national stagnation was made by people. It can be unmade by people. We cannot continue to arrest, to cajole, and charge with treason young people who, out of frustration, say statements. Whether those statements are unfortunate or not, it's immaterial. They are terrorists who are ensuring this country has no fuel. Terrorists who are stealing forex. Terrorists who are filling. Until we spend expensive resources arresting terrorists and not just going to the trade fair and making empty threats on how to deal with the big fish. Prison has become the place where big criminals keep the small criminals. Until the big criminals start going to prison, we're not doing anything. So, you are the first crisis. Keep your eyes on the ball. The ball is long term. Even if Tika Visa each, Chichawea Chimwe, if we don't remove the structure of the economy, the structure of oppression and governance, if it doesn't change, if there's no comprehensive state reform, no matter how beautiful, how young, no matter how dashing, how diverse the new leader becomes, we remain mired in crisis. Because it is a structural crisis, it requires structural solutions. As Rev Timosia Aiwa, Jesse, Bait, Dara, Twangra, Kupisa Quach. Musajka, Then you are the first crisis. The second crisis is our ideas. This space must be about alternatives. Those alternatives can't come from these wise men and women alone. If you stop thinking and you sublet the thinking function to a few men and women in leadership, you have created the problem we created in 1980. Advocate Mahere. When Mugabe came, Akapeka Safari suit, we started singing, Mawuya comrade. Mawuya tonga and akati tonga, until amen. We agreed, Nana Advocate Chamisa Nana Biti, that the constitution we make must be distrustful of Chamisa, of Biti, of Kagoro. The framework of leadership must not put any faith in men, because the two of them, the Bible says, cursed is he who put their trust in the arm of a man. Our trust should be in our collective ability to reach the destination of the nation we have hoped for and we have imagined. Thank you.
Brian, thank you very much. Thank you very much for setting the context of our crisis and describing the threats that Zimbabwe faces so beautifully. I think the key thing that I derived from his presentation is the fact that the crisis that Zimbabwe faced in 1980 is the same crisis that Zimbabwe faces today. And just to put that into context, in 1980, my parents hadn't even met. 40 years down the line, the country is still in the same crisis. And that requires us to start imagining a different Zimbabwe. Start an ideas festival, a game of really reimagining how beautiful Zimbabwe can be and how we can solve the crisis. So without further ado, I'd like to thank Brian very much. And that description of the crisis was not to make us, feel pity for ourselves, but really to inspire within us a thirst for change. Zimbabwe cannot be in the same place it was in 1980. We really need to move the country forward, and urgently. Our next speaker is Senator Consilia Chinanjavana, who's going to talk to us about women and the struggle for democratization in Zimbabwe. Now, I was just speaking to the senator before her presentation and talking about the fact that every rights issue is a women's issue. We don't silo women into a corner and say, go and have a discussion, and I think she used Mahumbu and say, and I'm not taura oku. Every rights issue, if you're talking about the economy, it's a women's rights issue. If you're talking about justice and constitutionalism, it's a women's rights issue. So with that, let's give Senator Consilia Chinanjavana a big round of applause as she talks to us about the women's struggle for democracy.
Thank you and good morning. Pam Soroi, President of the Democratic Movement, the President of the People, Advocate Honorable Nelson Chamisa. Here we go on the democratization of Zimbabwe. And Mr. President said that cannot be done without moving forward with the women folk of Zimbabwe, for they constitute 53% of the population of this nation. The role of women in democratization has been an uphill task, Mr. President, especially for the women folk, for they receive the brunt of all the negativity of a nation going askew. As it has been characterized by manipulation, opposed to genuine attempt to promote gender equality and equity, there is a glass ceiling for women in terms of how far they can go up the political ladder. It is in this vein that we hypothesize that women have been sold a political dummy, where they have been given an impression that they are equals in governance, yet on the other hand, recent political developments reveal that gender equity in government remain a mirage. Women participation in electoral processes has been an enduring task, Mr. President said, for it is not easy. Families are at risk when women embark on this road to democratization. Women bear the brunt of all the negatives, especially in the process of political movements. They bear the brunt of poverty, the brunt of all the suffering that takes place in the country. Women have the right to participate in the political arena, life of their country, and there has been a slight increase, yes, since the 1980s, though they are victims of violence and are physically maimed by state agents, the police, army, the CIO, and non-official agents like the war veterans, youth militias, and political party supporters. Affected differently by political violence because of their weaker physical status, to their inability to run away and go into hiding due to family responsibilities. Women have been affected, Mr. President, as victims of intimidation. They cannot stand up and say their will because there is no room to speak up to the rights of a human being, which are also the rights of women. Unsafe during elections, and with the West year being 2008, where women were forced to vote for ZANU-PF, the incumbent, we can't call it the ruling party, but those that are sitting there, because of threats of violence. Tortured and assaulted, the women received, indecently assaulted, subjected to sexual violence, and of late by uniformed forces. GBV as far as rape is extremely prevalent and massively underreported, the women are suffering in silence. The roles by women in national democratization. The women of Zimbabwe have become breadwinners. Nobody can say no to that. They are the cross-border traders. They are the vendors. Women are breadwinners in their own right because they are the ones in the informal sector selling their wares and crossing the borders, and by so doing, they actually help in the GDP of the country and drive the democratization process. We have to expose the regime, Mr. President. We also have women marchers who were brutally assaulted and raped by both the Mugabe and the Mnangagwa regimes. The likes of Grace Pinjem, Sekai Holland, Mary Pamire, and Tabitha Kumalo, to name but a few. Most of the women, even sitting here among us, Mr. President, have suffered this brunt. We also, Mr. President, have need for, we participated in the constitution-making process. The group of 40 of women managed to push for the agenda of women so that we have the current constitution of Zimbabwe, an authority that is being abused, Mr. President said. Had we to follow the constitution of Zimbabwe, it already talks of equality and equity because there is a provision of the 50-50 of space in all places of leadership for the women of Zimbabwe, but implementation is now. We impress upon you, Mr. President. We know you have a listening ear. The women are clamoring for their space. It was a bad patch, but it opened up some opportunity because that is when we saw women organizations coming in and international organizations realizing who women are. As women of Zimbabwe, the constitution is in sync with several of the key international, regional gender equality and women's rights instruments that Zimbabwe has signed, and to a lesser extent some ratified too. These include the CEDAW, the Protocol to the African Charter on Human and People's Rights, on the rights of the women in Africa, and the Southern African Development Community Gender and Development Protocol, among others. There is what is called the proportional representation, Mr. President, in the governance of the nation right now. A special measure to increase women's representation in parliament with 60 reserved seats for women elected through a system of proportional representation based on the votes cast for political party candidates in a general election for the 210 members was implemented. The 60 reserved seats for women will be additional to any women elected to the other 210 seats. Mr. President, we are saying to any women who will have the chance to be elected, they need the space. They need their equal share. They need the 50-50 out of the 210 constituencies that make Zimbabwe, because they are also women of Zimbabwe. Mr. President said the provisions also apply to the Senate, which the female and male candidates are listed alternatively in a zebra system that applies to the upper house. I think the younger women in Zimbabwe need to enjoy the same benefit, the zebra system, a male and a female following each other in the tenets of that structure. Mr. President said the formation of the Gender Commission was a welcome development, and whose mandate includes the investigation of possible gender rights and violations, receiving and considering gender-based complaints from the public, conducting research on gender and social justice issues, recommending changes to discriminatory laws and practice, and proposing affirmative action programs. Through women's active participation in politics, the above commission was established, tasked with promoting gender equality in all spheres of life. But Mr. President, we can't just leave the podium without appealing and impressing on you that it doesn't stop there with the commission. It begins with real statutes that would help us and help the women of Zimbabwe achieve. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator. We certainly look forward in the party to a lot more women participating in the political space, and we want our party to be safe for women to participate. We don't want women to be abused or trolled. We want their ideas to come to the fore. Now, I'd like to, through you, or allow me, President, to recognize certain embassy representatives who are here today. We've got a representative from the British Embassy, I think John Cully, a representative of the American Embassy, I think it's Cara, and a representative of the Australian Embassy. So we welcome you very much. Obviously, we welcome the fact that you are here. We're extremely privileged in the fact that you're able to share with us our vision and hear what our alternative policy to drive Zimbabwe forward is. Now, it gives me great pleasure to call upon Honorable Tendai Biti, our Vice President of the Movement for Democratic Change, who's going to talk to us about the MDC's comprehensive reform agenda. If we can all give him a massive round of applause.
Well, thank you, Fadzi. Good morning, fellow Zimbabweans and our invited guests, particularly members of the diplomatic corps, the president of our movement, Advocate Nelson Chamisa, the leadership of our movement, the ordinary members of our movement, and fellow Zimbabweans. Today is a day that we never thought would actually come. We wrote and prepared this document before May 2019, before our Congress. But for various reasons, we couldn't launch it before our Congress. And then even after Congress, for one reason or the other, we couldn't launch it. We could only launch it today. So for us, today is a great day when we launch our alternative platform on how we propose to move our country forward. But Reload does offer a solution and an agenda for moving our country forward. But you cannot design a plan, you cannot design a trajectory without locating and identifying the nature of the crisis. Zimbabwe at the present moment, in July 2019, is a very fragile state, is a very vulnerable state. In fact, since 1888, when modern Zimbabwe was formed, you will not find a point in time, a historical juncture where there's been so many multiple challenges that are converging at the very same historical juncture to create a very weak state, a very disempowered citizen, a very uncertain individual, a very toxic environment. So what is the nature of the crisis? There is a crisis of leadership, as Brian correctly captured it. There is a crisis of confidence. There is an economic meltdown, an economic implosion of unprecedented proportions, which I'm going to talk about in a few minutes. The cockpit itself is shaking. The regime is arrested by the same contradictions that created it in November 2017. So we are in a very weak spot. But the sum totality of all these points I've raised is that there's one fundamental crisis in Zimbabwe, and that fundamental crisis is a political crisis, and that everything else, the economy that I will speak of, is but a symptom, is but a reflection of that fundamental crisis. And at the epicenter of that political crisis is that you have a society and a citizen that is being run by people that it did not give consent and authority to govern the same. Modern societies and modern states function on the basis of the existence of a social contract. A contract in respect of which those that are governed voluntarily surrender their authority to those that govern them. So that at the end of the day, what governs is not the gun. What governs is not the bullet. What governs is not the tank. What governs is the consent of the citizen that was voluntarily surrendered and voluntarily given through a public, legitimate process that we normally call an election. So to put it very crudely, the epicenter of our crisis emanates from consent that was taken away violently in November 2017. To put it simply, the epicenter of our challenges derives from an election that was stolen on the 30th of July 2018. The challenge of legitimacy, the challenge of consensus, the challenge of consent, the challenge of an authority that exists, that derives authority not from the people of Zimbabwe, but from extra-legal processes and infrastructure, including military. So there are fundamental questions which we seek to answer in our document. There are fundamental questions which Zimbabwe has to answer as a precondition for moving forward. Without answering these questions with great respect, this country cannot move forward. So we have to answer the legitimate question: who won the 2018 election? We have to answer the legitimate question: how does Zimbabwe prevent the vicious cycles of stolen and rigged elections? Since 1980, this country has had 12 elections. That is an average of an election every 4 years. But the unique characteristic of all those elections is that they've been contested, that they've been followed by multiple court applications in our courts of law, that they have divided us more than we were before the election day. So in order to resolve this continuous reproduction of predatory election cycles, in order to converge these vicious predatory election cycles into virtuous circles of inclusivity, we have to answer this challenge of legitimacy. Number 3, how does Zimbabwe create an inclusive, impartial dispute settlement machinery that leaves opponents united and with a common vision for Zimbabwe? Those are some of the questions that we need to answer and we seek to answer in our document. The second issue is the challenge of how the citizen is reproducing himself in our country. The challenge of the economy. Yes, we have structural problems that arise out of the nature of our economy. An economy that was inherited on the infrastructure of colonialism, a setup which was designed to serve the interests of a narrow few, a setup which was based on a false accumulation model, one based on extraction, one based on exportation of raw materials that are extracted from our country. If you were to wake up Sir John Roads today, you wouldn't get lost by the same accumulation model, because we are still exporting tobacco, we are still exporting diamonds, we are still exporting gold, we are still exporting platinum the way we did in 1923. So we've got a false accumulation model. We acknowledge that. But at the epicenter of the current challenges is an infrastructure of controls, is an infrastructure of dirigism, is an infrastructure of self-made and self-induced policy distortions. As I'm talking to you right now, ladies and gentlemen, 95% of our people are unemployed. As I'm talking to you right now, ladies and gentlemen, 85% of our people are living below the poverty datum line, surviving on less than US 35 cents a day. As I'm talking to you right now, there is no productivity. There is absolutely no productivity. The IMF, in its April 2019 Regional Economic Outlook, puts our growth rate at minus 5.5%. That report was written in January and February, when we still had power in Zimbabwe. Now we are experiencing unprecedented power cuts of 18 hours a day, because our power generation plants, both at Wange Unit 1 and 6, and at Kariba, the two generators that are there, they were built in the 50s and were supposed to be decommissioned in 1984. Brian spoke about kutongwa nevadzimu. Tiri kurana power on zvimishina zvavadzimu ma-ancestors. And that explains the nature of the current energy crisis. But because, Comrade President, we do not have electricity, we can't produce. Mines can't produce. Farmers can't work. So where the IMF put our growth rate at minus 5.5% in 2019, our growth rate in 2019 will be minus 8.5%. Then inflation has reared its ugly head again. Month-on-month inflation is now in excess of 50%. When it gets to 80%, economists call it hyperinflation. The definition of hyperinflation is when your month-on-month inflation reaches 80% and above. The current annualized rate of inflation is now 500%. So we have moved, ladies and gentlemen, in less than 10 years, we have moved in a space of two extremes. The hyperinflation of 2018, which saw inflation reached 500 billion %, the second highest in the history of mankind, after Hungary in 1956, to now, where we are now on 500%. Now, where we were in 2008, it is impossible to get to. You have to be so poor to push us to 2008. But to push us to another 2008 in 2019 in less than 10 years, it's a miracle of failure. It's a miracle of inability. The English words and the English language have no word to describe the failure of the current regime. Those who specialize in English, have to find a new lexicon to describe the current status quo. The features that Zimbabwe is reproducing now in 2019, which it reproduced in 2018, they've only happened once in a country that was involved in two world wars, German between the wars. We have not had the war, but we've produced features that are less and weaker than German between the wars. So it's a miracle of faith. ZANU-PF deserves to be in the Guinea books. They deserve a Nobel Peace Prize for faith. So our document offers key solutions on the economy. Number one, the pursuit of fiscal consolidation. The pursuit of books that balance. So fiscal consolidation is key in the restoration of macroeconomic stability. There are some who are celebrating a surplus in the context of a Zimbabwean dollar when the 2018 budget was in US dollars. A surplus in the context of cash accounting, when normal accounting is accrual accounting. A surplus in the context of huge deficits in social expenditure. How can a father celebrate that I've got $2 in my pocket, but you have not paid school fees for children, and you have not paid groceries for children? So it's so moronic, it's so myopic to celebrate a surplus that is non-existent and that is expressed in the money that has no value at all. Number two, we have to deal with messy monetary policy. We have to deal with the messy monetary policy. The US dollar was never imposed by any government in this country. The US dollar was imposed by a public, a citizen that recognized that its own currency, the Zimbabwean dollar, then known as the bearer check, had become an instrument of arbitrage. So it is the people of Zimbabwe who declared a vote of no confidence in their own currency. And so far as I know, once a currency has been caught in flagrante, it is not possible to reintroduce the same. That is why in the history of finance and economics, there is no country that is involuntarily de-dollarized that has been able to de-dollarize. It's not possible. It's not possible. So as a simple solution in the short term, the MDC proposes the re-dollarization of the Zimbabwean economy. We have to bring the US dollar back as a simple solution to the crisis. But we have to fix productivity by making sure that industries are functioning. So supply side reforms are key, and we speak about that in our document called SMART, which must be read together with this document. We speak about resolving the debt crisis. We note with regret that this current government has been fumbling, moving from pillar to pillar, but ultimately going nowhere on the issue of debt. Debt has to be resolved because debt is a precondition for development. Resolving the Zimbabwe debt crisis guarantees that we as a country can access the huge amounts of money that are found at the World Bank, that are found at the African Development Bank, that are necessary to kickstart gross capital formation in this country, to kickstart the agenda of infrastructure reconstruction of this country. In communities, 86 out of 1,000 mothers are dying on childbirth. 96 out of 1,000 babies are dying on birth, infant mortality. So we have to make and create hospitals that function. I know the president will speak on that. On the reform agenda, we have to deal with the two twin beasts that are arresting our country. First is the challenge of the securitization of our country that emanates after November of 2017. How do we create an environment and a legal framework that creates a democratic coup-proofing of our country? And we speak about this in our document. So there has to be a comprehensive arena of reforms, political reforms, legal reforms, legislative reforms, and Honorable Mashakada is going to speak about that. On state capture, we go to town about the evil of corruption. We reckon that out of every dollar that is generated in Zimbabwe, 70% is being lost through corruption. The country has been captured by cartels. The country is a victim to the conflation between the security agents, ZANU-PF, and the state. So how do we break this military party state conflation that is engendering a massive corruption in this country? And that corruption is reproducing itself in 6 centers, as we mentioned in our document. The first one are cartels connected and surrounding the issue of foreign currency and the US dollar. They go to the Reserve Bank and access the US dollar on a rate as 1:1, but they flood 4th Street, they flood Rootport. And those who are dealing with foreign currency illegally in this country are the who is who of ZANU-PF. And you see their wealth in the cars that they are driving. How can little Zimbabwe afford Lamborghinis and Ferraris? It is happening because of this infrastructure of corruption. Number two is the infrastructure around fuel. The fuel industry is a sewer of slimy rats that are milking our country. Why does Zimbabwe need to import fuel from Singapore? Singapore does not produce fuel, but all our fuel comes from Singapore. And if you look at our current account, Singapore has suddenly become the biggest trading partner of Zimbabwe. But those of you who have been to Singapore know that there is nothing there except a significant financial infrastructure. So there's a little company called Trafigura that is dominating the fuel industry, and we have to deal with that. Number three is command agriculture. Number four are parastatals. You have seen the audit reports of the Controller and Auditor General. There is a massive corruption. On Monday, Comrade President, we were dealing with the audit of a report of the Ministry of Lands and Agriculture. In 1 month alone, in November of 2017, $1.5 billion, 6 times more than the budget of the Ministry of Lands, was just paneled to GMB. And up to now, there's no single voucher, no single invoice that justifies or proves how this money was spent. And in that month alone of November 2018, the Ministry of Lands consumed $2 billion outside Parliament, outside the budget. When the total country budget was $4 billion, they stole $2 billion. Only in Zimbabwe. So when some of them are say that they are deacons of looting, it's an understatement. They are bishops of looting. The third challenge on Comrade President is the electoral question. The third challenge is the electoral question. And here we propose fundamental reforms, including the complete disbanding of the Zimbabwe Election Commission and its secretariat, including the introduction of both biometric voters' roll and biometric voting. There's a difference there. So in 2018, we had biometric voter registration, but not biometric voting. So we propose in our document that there has to be both biometric voter registration and biometric voting. We also seek to propose major amendments to the Electoral Act. We also make major proposals around the context of voting, the environment, and so forth. Honorable Mashakada will speak to those things. But what is the agency? Why are we launching this document today? The country is burning. There's an agency in this country. And unless we offer solutions as we are doing today now, you're going to hear the president, there will be an implosion in this country. So we are launching this document to offer our ideas, to offer a path for Zimbabwe, to reload our struggle in order to create a soft landing for our country. For without a soft landing, there will be an implosion in this country. What are the drivers of agents? Number one, it is the disaffection, the alienation, the anger, the frustration that is arising out of the stolen 30 July 2018 election. So that's a driver of anger. That's a driver of frustration. The second driver of anger and frustration is the economic crisis. You cannot have a population like Zimbabwe where 70% of the same is below the age of 35. But in that 70%, there's unemployment levels of 95%. These kids are smart, they're intelligent. You find them on Instagram, on Twitter. A few of them are still on Facebook, but they are smart. They're a smart generation. But they're angry because they're unemployed. So to avert a situation where you find the reproduction of what happened in January of 2019 or the 1st of August 2019, there has to be an urgent solution. And that's why we are launching this document. The third driver of agency is the cockpit civil war that is taking place in Zimbabwe at the present moment. The center is not holding. there are clear divisions and balkanization in the state and in government. One of the things that November 2017 did was not only to make certain units of the state irrelevant and weak, in particular the police and the intelligence, but one of the things that November 2017 did was also to make ZANU-PF extremely weak. Now when a board, even ZANU-PF, which normatively is supposed to serve democracy, becomes weak, it means you are making room for the inevitable entry of undemocratic players and actors. Which is why I said at the beginning, the regime is weighted down by the contradiction that created it in November 2017. There is cockpit disorder, and where there is cockpit disorder, there is a tendency for unconstitutional resort to illegitimate and extra legal means of resolving the crisis. So we must create a soft landing for our crisis, and that's why we have the plan that we are launching today. We have to save Zimbabwe and offer a sustainable path for redemption and salvation. I thank you very much. Sikomo kwambiri.
Thank you very much to Honorable Tendai Biti, Vice President of the party. We're going to move on now, but just before we do so, I'd said from the British Embassy we've got John Cully. It's actually Calvin Duff. Please forgive me, Calvin. Right, moving on, it's my privilege to call upon Dr. Tapiwa Mashakada. Let's give him a huge round of applause. He's also going to shed light on the roadmap to recovery.
Thank you very much. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning, President. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm very honored to unpack the reload document. We have had very comprehensive presentations from Brian Kagoro and Advocate BT and Maichina Nzwawana on the situation that we are confronting as a country. My task now is to unpack the key components of reload. And reload is an acronym standing for Roadmap on Economic Recovery, Roadmap on Economic Recovery, Legitimacy, Openness, and Democracy. So it's short for reload. Now, people talk of dialogue very loosely, but dialogue should be based on key fundamental issues, and reload seeks to highlight those fundamental issues that should underpin any dialogue process in this country. And we identify 5 key planks of reload. The first angle of reload is to return the country to legitimacy. The problems that we are facing in this country have to do with the question of politics, the question of governance, the questions of political reform. Who won the elections? That's a legitimate question that has been hounding the country and leading to serious economic dislocation and political dislocation. Now, unless we address the first angle on legitimacy, we are not going anywhere, because the economy is in the jaws of politics. The economy is suffering from a legitimate question. So we reckon in reload that we have to address the issues of politics, governance, and legitimacy in order to drive the country forward. Without confidence, this country cannot move ahead. People don't trust in the government that is ruling them. People don't trust the economic solutions being proffered by the government, because they believe it is the government which is causing the problems. And they believe the MDC has got the solutions to these problems. So it's a legitimate question that has to be resolved. The second pillar are comprehensive reform agendas. And the first issue on comprehensive reform agenda are political reforms. And these political reforms take a raft of measures to unpack. In the reload document, the first issue under political reform is that we must have one national vision. As Zimbabweans, what is our vision? There are different interpretations of vision. ZANU-PF has got its own vision, MDC has got its own vision, the civil society have got their own vision. So we need to develop one national vision. A country cannot develop without a vision. And there's only one country in Southern Africa, which is called Zimbabwe, which does not have a vision. The second reform issue is to make sure that we enforce or actualize or consummate our constitution. Since the constitution was enacted, there's been reluctance in implementing it wholesale. We still talk of devolution, it has not happened. We still talk of strengthening national institutions, that is not happening. So we need to consummate the implementation of the constitution, especially aspects to do with devolution and decentralization. The independence of Chapter 12 constitutions is key in our political reform agenda. The judiciary, the Anti-Corruption Commission, the Gender Commission, and all Chapter 12 commissions which are encapsulated in the Constitution, those have to be independent so that the executive does not muzzle those institutions. This is part of the political reform agenda. And we need to create a consensus state where the citizenry plays a critical role in defining the direction and the policies of the state. Policies should not be top down, they must be bottom up. And that is a key tenet to develop the country. Violence, there's an infrastructure of violence in this country which has to be dismantled so that we allow tolerance and we allow coexistence of people with different ideas and views. National healing is a key question. This country is polarized. You heard from the Moshande Commission and the articulation by Advocate Chamisa, the President, and Advocate BT on the problem bedeviling this country. This country is seriously divided, so there is need for national healing, transitional justice, reconciliation, and truth-telling in order to move the country forward. Other reform issues include the size of our government. We are only a population of 16 million, but compared to the size of our bureaucracy and government, we need to really reform that. And even our country's provinces, they have to be renamed. They connote divisions. They connote tribalism. So we need to rename our provinces. The role of traditional leaders. Why should traditional leaders be an extension of ZANU-PF? The chiefs must be depoliticized. They must be apolitical. That is what the MDC is putting on the table. Chiefs cannot be an extension of ZANU-PF, intimidating people, making sure that food is distributed on a partisan basis by chiefs. That cannot be allowed in a new Zimbabwe. We need an inclusivity, and we need to reconsider the electoral system and reorient the political system in line with the constitution. And we have to redefine the role of the securocrats, the military, as articulated by Brian. So it's a whole raft of political reform agenda that we are looking at. The other pillar of political reforms is to touch on corruption. This country cannot move forward because of corruption. There's a state capture, there's an elite which is controlling the affairs of the state. If you look at the foreign currency market, who is determining the exchange rate? Is it the market? or some cartels. We believe there's a cartel which is manipulating the exchange rate. They make sure that the parallel market exchange rate, they determine. The official exchange rate, they determine. So at the end of the day, they are manipulating the market to make sure that we don't have a free float which responds to the dictates of the market. So they are controlling the foreign currency sector, and that has to be dismantled. It's one ugly head of corruption. The other corruption is in the commodities sector, the diamond sector. Where is the diamond money? Where is the diamond revenue? Where is the platinum revenue? Where is the chrome and gold revenue? There's a lot of lack of transparency and lack of openness in these sectors. Command agriculture. 10 billion put into command agriculture. And only a year later, we are importing maize. We are importing cereals. What did the money do in the agricultural sector? That's corruption. That is embedded and being peddled by a few ruling elites. I can go on and on. Infrastructural projects. You had Zinara and the scandal in Zinara. Honorable B.T. chairs the Public Accounts Committee. He will tell you the scandals after scandals in public finance management and administration. Procurement, everything. There's corruption. So we need to deal with corruption head on as part of our reform agenda. But we also propose legal reforms going ahead. And we've got a raft of legal reforms. Not just petty reforms that government is trying to impress the international community. We need comprehensive reforms. And the starting point is to harmonize the constitution with all the laws of the country, which is moving at a very slow pace. We need comprehensive electoral reforms and a law dealing with devolution and decentralization of the state. We also need a law dealing with the land question and the issue of compensation so that that can be disposed of quite quickly. And we need to transform the security sector so that there is a law to deal with the National Security Council. That will be a professional body superintending national issues. The issue of POSA. You know, what government has done is just to rename POSA. If you call a notorious dog by another name, it doesn't change its character of being a notorious dog. So we need to reform POSA comprehensively to make sure that human rights are at the center of political activity. And there's democracy, freedom of movement, and freedom of organizing. Including AIPA and the Broadcasting Services Act, all those have to be revisited. I've already talked about devolution, but also, as MDC, we are also cognizant of greening the economy. We need comprehensive measures on climate change, on sustainable development, to make sure that in whatever we do, we mainstream sustainable development. Labor and employment legislation has to be revisited. This country needs to come up with a harmonized labor act that incorporates the public sector, the private sector, so that we've got one labor law for the country. And also the identification and implementation of all ILO standards and measures is very key. So we need to ratify all the ILO instruments governing the labor market and also acceding to international instruments. I'm just going very quickly to summarize the document. We also need to enact legislation that protects the rights of women, children, minorities, and people living with disabilities. That is our reform agenda as the MDC. We go to institutional reforms. There's a lot that needs to be done to free public institutions which have been captured. And I can tell you we need reforms in the judiciary. The judiciary is highly politicized. And all commissions, we have to revisit them and ensure that they are independent and perform their fiduciary roles in terms of the constitution. The Reserve Bank of Zimbabwe is captured. We need to reform it. The security sector, I have already said, the public media, the state enterprises, traditional leaders, local authorities, and so on and so forth. So there's need for a raft of reforms on our institutions. Now we know what happened in July 2018 and what we propose as a way of reforming the electoral field to make sure that we have elections that are not contestable in the future. And we have elections that will lead to a legitimate government of all time. These are the proposed reforms we want to do on the electoral field. Disband ZEC. That ZEC has to be disbanded completely. It's useless. We need to amend the Electoral Act to ensure that the date of election is fixed in the law so that there's certainty. And there are other electoral reform measures that we have always articulated day in, day out. The creation of an authentic biometric voters roll, introduction of modern automated biometric voting, and automation of all electoral processes. Consensual, negotiated and agreed process on delimitation. You know, in the next election, there will be delimitation. We have to agree on how to go about the delimitation because NPF has got a tendency to gerrymander their constituencies in order to rig. All electoral material that has to be used in the election has to be agreed upon, including how to treat the election residue and the question of who is printing the ballot paper and the print run of the ballot papers, and all other electoral amendment issues that we have always referred to, including the right of the diaspora to cast their vote and the demilitarization of the electoral process. Media reforms, I've already talked about IPA. The involvement of the United Nations is very critical in the elections that are going to come, including SADC and the AU. And of course, doing away with the role of traditional leaders. The third angle of our reform agenda is peace building, nation building, and restoration and reconstruction. But you cannot have peace building without transitional justice. There has to be transitional justice in order to foster peace building. And then, of course, the economy. We need to make sure that the economy grows, there's no corruption, all these shortages are dealt with. Because the shortages are just a symptom of the structural problem. And we need to go back to the multi-currency regime, as already alluded to, and we need to reindustrialize. Finally, in order to achieve all these reforms, and by the way, what I'm articulating is all contained in this document. In order to consummate all these reforms, I think there will need to be a mechanism, a transitional mechanism, that is going to superintend the implementation of all these reforms, which will form part of our dialogue agenda. I wish to thank you for this time given.
Thank you very much. Let's give Dr. Tapiwa Mashakada another round of applause. I'd also like to encourage you all to please ensure you get your copy of Reload, our roadmap to economic recovery, legitimacy, openness, and democracy, where you'll be able to read in detail the contents of our alternative policy. Now, without further ado, it gives me great pleasure to call upon our president of the Movement for Democratic Change, Advocate Nelson Chamisa, to officially launch Reload. Mr. President. Let's give him a round of applause.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Comrades and friends, we may be seated. Allow me at this juncture to salute all of you who have come here. I'm really impressed. Comrade Secretary General, this is impressive. You have shown that this is the path of excellence. Thank you for organizing this very wonderful platform. You and your team, we are impressed. If we can do this at a party level, what more at a governmental level? Mukaka kupera. Kumberi kwe kumberi. So well done, Comrade Wende, for this fantastic show, particularly for the invitations you made to one of our comrades, Dr. Kagoro, who has been with us for a long time. We said troops are realigning. The change agents are coming together. We are uniting back to the basics. So I'm very happy to see him articulating the narrative, giving us an expose that you gave us. Quite an impressive one. Reminding us of our morals, reminding us of our back, then values that we must stick to, particularly in our local authorities and various zones of autonomy where we are occupying. Thank you, Dr. Kagoro. I've seen that traveling has not affected you. You still are original. Thank you very much. Allow me again to acknowledge the presence of our standing committee members here present, Vice President Beatty and the entire team. I will not mention by name. I can see you here present, national executive members. Thank you again for coming. I see you have come from all the corners of our country. Thank you for coming. I see members of parliament. I know that you have had to forgo your workshops. I'm told some had buses waiting for them, but they've had to come here to give and punctuate this occasion. Thank you very much for coming. Our honorable members of parliament, senators included, the acting mayor, Bamakoni, who is also here together with the councillors from Harare and other cities. We acknowledge you. Harare province, the leadership, we just have the province. I'm sure the leadership, thank you for being here. We also want to acknowledge our dignitaries from the embassies. Thank you for coming. I will not mention you by name. You have already been acknowledged. We thank you for the honor that you have bestowed upon us. Today is a very important day. Very important because we are clearly articulating an alternative path plan to a new Zimbabwe. A lot of people are confused about where we are going, what we are going to do, our role as Democrats in terms of providing a solution to the challenges of our country. Here's your answer. We have a document that is well written. We have thought leadership in our midst. We are thought leaders. But beyond being thought leaders, we are actors. So when we think, we also act. We have two courages, the courage to think and the courage to act. So when you have seen us not acting, it's because acting's moment has not come. But when it comes, we will act. I say this because I know, Takamira signal. Takamira signal. No, there will be no signal. You are the signal. And when we say you are the signal, we know what we mean. We don't communicate and advise our opposition. We don't take instructions from ZANU-PF on what to do and what not to do. We do what we have to do when we feel we have to do what we have to do. And we are going to act. So today, Vaskala is not here. Vamwanoti kusungwa. Kusungwa mafuta. Musachika kusungwa. Kusungwa kubhabhatizwa. Kusungwa jere ndo nzvimbo inogara vatadzwa nevatadzi. Mazvinzo zvandataura. Munhu kana akutadza wapa zvembiri unosungwa. Munhu akutadza wamurova unosungwa. Munyaya dzematongerwo enyika, if you are ahead of your opponent, unosungwa. So as a lawyer was asking, I said, but what did Scala commit as an offense? Nzakati kwanza toda kubvisa munhu asipo. Hakuna munhu anoita mhosva yekubvisa munhu asipo. Imhosva iyo. Kuti munhu hapo woti kwanza ndamubvisa. Urungotaura wako because hapo. The world over, illegitimate governments are always fought. And what makes people fight illegitimate government is because they do not derive their authority from the constitution and from the people. And doing so is not a crime. It is actually a duty of every citizen. The world over. This is in Sudan, this is in Syria, wherever you go, we have a duty as citizens to perform that historic task, that revolutionary mandate, to make sure that we have a legitimate government, per the constitution, per the people. In this country, we don't have a Westminster Westminster model of democracy, which is power residing in parliament. Our power resides in the constitution and in the people. That is where the power is. So if you don't have those as the sources of power, usati nyebera. Takasungirwa vasikala avapo pana. Ostalos, I'm told, was called by the police. Chibaya is a treason charge. Joanna Mamombe treason charge. Mukapiko MP treason charge. Chikwinya MP treason charge. Machingauta MP treason charge. Wende iwende erume, but ameno tunompa musa yakuti treason charge. Honorable Stole Chungwiza treason charge. Ostalos, our youth secretary general, inciting violence. Comrade Mtingwende treason charge. Ndo kudiko. Munangagwa aunyari we. Kuti uruda kuramba uchida ndo zara katarisa. Glory is in doing what has to be done to defeat the problem. The lions in our midst are the problems we are facing. And that is the challenge we have. So that is what we are confronting. Now, I'm saying this as a preliminary thing because the Dr. Van Wanzwisise, kuti MDC is a democratic party. Vatwangirai and all the civics whom I have to acknowledge who are in our midst, when we began this project, including the ZCTU, we said our cause is going to be democratic change. Not violence, not non-democratic. So that's why our name is Movement for Democratic Change. We know the pain of taking a path of democracy and non-violence. You are at the receiving end, but we will not depart from that path. And we are going to have peaceful and radical engagement with the problems of our country, including confronting what has to be confronted in terms of the Constitution. Because the Constitution allows for a demonstration. Leaders are changed through political pressure and also through an election. Particularly if the election fails to do its mandate, political pressure becomes a necessity, as in our circumstances. Rabiti, I'm saying this so that we understand where we are. What is the method of the struggle? What is the form of the struggle? What is the nature of our tools and tactics as we engage? That's where we are. So it is with great pleasure, ladies and gentlemen, that we present to you a roadmap, a signpost for the democratization of Zimbabwe, the construction of a sustainable Zimbabwe following our successful Congress held in May. Our Congress had a theme defining a new course for Zimbabwe. It has become so clear that we are indeed the defenders of that new course. Zimbabwe is burning. Zimbabwe is in the throes of a serious political and socio-economic crisis. The resolution of this crisis, more than ever before, has become a matter of extreme urgency and emergency. It is clear that soft landing the crisis has to be done by creating a Zimbabwe that averts this inevitable and impending implosion. I do not doubt in my mind, comrades and friends, that Zimbabwe is heading for a disaster, is facing an abyss. A dark cloud hangs over this nation. But to avoid this implosion, we must take bold steps that will avoid the catastrophe that we are going to engage. Please stop that. To avoid this implosion, ladies and gentlemen, we need to have a new paradigm and a new narrative, a new discourse, a new way of engaging in our political activism. And this involves what we are going to put in place as a 5-step program to find our country out of this crisis. But let me just say, what country do we want to build? What future are we creating? What is the pitch and the narrative or the platform that we are coming upon? We seek to reload the Zimbabwean struggle. And to reload our struggle, we are going to use new tools, new strategies for the democratization of our country in our effort to create a national vision which is shared, one which is based on national consensus, agreement, and also in our ability to make sure that our politics is based on tolerance and inclusivity. For us, we are saying it's not enough to replace Mr. Mnangagwa with another leader. It's not enough to say that Mugabe is gone and therefore we've resolved our problems. It's not enough to replace personalities and faces and names. What is enough is for us to begin a reload of our values, a reload of who we are as a people, a reload of where we are coming from, a reload of the moral ethics. So we have a moral compass that we are going to define, and that is already enshrined in that document. What do we believe in? What is our culture? You can't change a country when you don't change the culture and you don't change the structure of that country. That is why in our context, we are redefining our value system. What do we value? We value life. So as we plan for our peaceful democratization programs, we will make sure that what is at the core is saving lives. What is at the core is making sure that we don't lose lives. Our opposite number in ZANU-PF don't believe in life. Life is meaningless to them. That's why killing and bloodletting is a hobby. But for us, saving and protecting lives is also a national obligation. And you will see that in our discourse, what we are going to do is to make sure that those two are observed and respected. Now, what is our problem in our politics? Comrade Kagoro, you mentioned a couple of issues. Those are some of the problems. But the biggest problem in our politics is that it's personalized. We don't have strong institutions. We have big men, we don't have big ideas. Africa's disaster is a disaster of absence of ideas, and yet we have big men who take over. When they die, we all have to die with them. That is the problem of Africa. That is what we must challenge. That is what we must confront. How do we depersonalize? You're right. The reason why Mr. Mnangagwa will not deliver is because within the bureaucracy, there are a lot of people who are not willing to change. But there are also a lot of people who want to modernize and transform, but they can't because politics is personalized. We need to depersonalize our politics. But in depersonalizing our politics, what is our focus? The focus, we have a platform, 2 issues we want to do for Zimbabwe. Restore your dignity, create your hope. So we are moving on the platform of dignity and hope. Our ideas for the future in this document are based on what we are saying in restoring your dignity, decency. As we know this year, ukasanyadziswa uri mukiu fuel, unononyara uri mukiu yemvura pachibhorani. Ukasanyara uri mukiu yechibhorani yemvura, unononyara uri mukiu yokutsvaga cash kuti upuwe 50 bond. Ukasanyara uri pa 50 bond, unononyara wakunotsvaga kudenda wana pension yangu. Hakuna munhu asina kumbonyara panyika pano. Whether you are a banker, you are a teacher, wakanyadziswa. You are a soldier, wakanyadziswa. You are a worker, a pensioner, wakanyadziswa. Because dignity has been taken away. The reason why most of our Zimbabweans are in South Africa doing jobs that they're not even supposed to be doing, dignity has been taken away. The reason why a lot are in the UK, in America, is because their dignity has been taken away. Our duty is to restore that dignity. We are great people, people of intellect, people who have a history of warriors. We fought for the liberation struggle to be successful. And we can still fight many other struggles for us to be free. We have the capacity. We are the people. And we have to do it for our country. We have to do it for future generations. The point being, restore your dignity. Growth and prosperity has to be restored. Our happiness has to be restored. We have to safeguard our wealth and the wealth of future generations. Munangagwa, Ngomongo. Unotara Zimbabwe is open for business. When we turn around, we see that Zimbabwe is open for digging. No investors, only dealers who are coming here to, steal our resources. We said we are not going to be focusing on east, west. The focus is a win-win for Zimbabwe and for our partners who are coming here to invest. Genuine investors who would want to come where there is confidence, trust, because capital has noise. They will never come here because of our cockpit noise. And that is what we must be able to deal with. Now, what is the issue that causes all these problems I have, right? It's leadership. President Clinton once said it's leadership, the economy is stupid. But in Zimbabwe, it's leadership stupid. All these things you are saying, their ancestors, is about leadership. But ancestors can actually lead very well if you know how to interact with them at an appropriate level. You only interact with them as the past, not as the present or the future. That is our tragedy. Leadership, leadership, leadership. But the beauty about our people is that they are waiting to be inspired by a responsible, accountable, and responsive, inclusive, and consulting leadership. We are that leadership. I went around, just yesterday I was in Hopefully. I hear Vamunangagwa vainda wakuno tsika pandakatsika. Ndikandizozoka tsika nditsikeo. Hapana chakashata, but it was a project, the local authority. Mukuru wenyika anofana kuvhura ma smart hospitals, not ma clinic. Sirai ma clinic kuna meya nema kanzura. Nesu anotungamirira ikoko because iwo wangoendi kuti mwana ndio wangu. Nguti paonekwa mwana ndio wangu. But it is because our leadership questions and deficits are so obvious. Now, what is the point of conflict? Comrades and friends, the point of conflict is the legitimate crisis. A political crisis. The crisis of governance. That is the nexus. That is the connection where we must meet. Vamunangagwa, you are not commanding half of the population. Isukuno kutakatakura 60% plus. So when you listen to my voice, you are not listening to the voice of a young man. You are listening to the voice of 60% plus. Who want this move forward? And this is the context within which Comrade BT mentioned the issue of agency. Because our problems are numerous. Because our problems are numerous, there is no grain, there is no bread, there is no fuel, there is no everything. There's nothing. But given this reality, what are we saying is the way forward? Some of you have said, Mangbana chao chao, let's go to the streets. Ongu, tunaenda ku street, but munaenda mune game plan. Munaenda, these are the objectives that munaenda achieve. And everyone must understand your goal. As your leader, nikakuti endai kwa kandi ndichikutumai, musiri convinced. Munongoita ka bubble, which will best. But when you are convinced that this is what is going to liberate our country, all of you being part of it, I can assure you, we will have results. And that is our leadership role. To make sure that you are not the crisis. Like what Wakagoro said. You have to be part of the solution. So we have a duty to make sure we engage citizens in a democratic action. But we have 5 issues, by way of concluding. 5 issues, which is what this document is all about. 5 issues are in this document. A 5-step program. Number 1, what is it that we must do as step number 1? Step number 1 is that we must build political pressure, diplomatic pressure on this administration to realize the need for peaceful change, to assure ourselves that our victory is secured in July, the July of 2018. So, we believe in non-violent, democratic action for peaceful change. We will be radically peaceful in terms of the Constitution. Radically peaceful. It sounds like a contradiction in terms. We will be radically peaceful in terms of the Constitution. The Constitution envisages platforms and opportunities where we have to provide the sort of leadership that is required. That is the form of struggle that we have to engage in. So we have to come together to build this political pressure. War veterans, come together. Let us reason. Students, come, let us reason together. Church leaders, come, let us reason together. Women's organizations, come, let us reason together. Political parties, genuine political parties, not government organized political opposition political parties like the ones we know. Genuine political parties, come, let us reason together. Let this be a collective action. It can't be a partisan affair. It can't be an MDC issue. So the first thing is to make sure that we have political pressure, diplomatic pressure, as a way of igniting the roadmap to the restoration of our issues. But what is the form of our struggle? We are Democrats. We are transformers. We are change agents. We are freedom fighters. We are the alternative. We are that new, and for that reason, that is who we are, and those are the tools we use to deal with our situation. What does the action mean? The action would have the following components: a peaceful citizen action, advocacy, mobilization of all progressive and democratic forces, engaging SADC, AU, and the international community to help us in terms of the agents and critical nature of the situation. Escalating the Zimbabwean crisis so that it becomes an international crisis. Building a global solidarity network around the crisis in Zimbabwe. That's step number. Step number 2, national dialogue. Now, a lot of you must understand, even if we were to take up, like what we did in 1978, to say now we have taken up arms of war, which we will not do. You still have to have a conference. You still have to have dialogue. But you would have lost lives. So if you are able to save lives, to have a dialogue to resolve the key questions of your country, why can't you do that? So national dialogue is a necessity, is an imperative stage. Stage number 2, national dialogue. Now, what is the nature of the dialogue? That's step number 2. For us, we believe that civilized societies must solve their problems and disputes through dialogue. Smoking a peace pipe. Comrade Timber, you smoke. You know how smoking a peace pipe is all about. But you must also know that citizens who refuse to think and reason together become a challenge, because they look at solutions as problems. Friends become enemies. Opportunities become threats. People failing to get the unit that is required. Our nation is divided. Our nation is divided on tribal lines. Our nation is divided on political lines. Our nation is divided. Even in soccer, there is division everywhere. In churches, there is division. But we need to heal the nation. To heal it, it must start and begin with leadership through dialogue. Now, what is the character of our dialogue on stage number 2? Number 1, the credible, legitimate dialogue must be bankable and irreversible. It must be scaffolded and underwritten, guaranteed by the international community and the people of Zimbabwe. There must be a mutually agreed facilitator and interlocutor. We are not going to accept this thing of Mr. Mnangagwa bringing his own appointed commissions to say there must be, adjudicators. They can't. They don't have the stamina, national or international, to be able to withstand the kind of political conflict that is there. In any event, you can't have dialogue of people who are like-minded. Dialogue is between those who are disagreeing. Our fundamental disagreement is that Mr. Mnangagwa was not elected. He's saying I was elected. So we must resolve that. He has said, please drop the legitimacy issue. I will not drop it because that's my trump card to my dialogue with you. If you are saying you are legitimate and I accept you are legitimate, why should I dialogue with you? Go ahead and lead the country. I must lead the opposition. But I will not do that because the issue of who has been given the mandate must be resolved first. Are we clear, Kom? That's stage number 2. That dialogue must be determined. It must have a timeline, sunset clause, termination clause, so that we don't have no mistake. I'm inclusive. Tapinda mu inclusive tede 5 years pu skwanywe mzoro tirimo tongo budata mishwi. We will not repeat that. Dialogue must have a sunset and a sunrise. Timelines that are very clear. This is the beginning, this is the end. Tick us, international community, mark us on the boxes. Tick the boxes. Once we have done all the boxes, let's do business. This will not spend time. Let me go and talk to the international community. It's about credibility. You must be credible. If you don't even believe your own self, you can't be believed outside. So the agreement has to be measurable, specific, achievable, and relevant, with clear targets and timelines. That's the second stage. The third stage is a national transitional mechanism. And we're not saying authority, because that should be the product of negotiations. What kind of an authority do we put in place? I know in South Africa they had a negotiation at CODESA, where they were co-chairing. It worked for them. But we must also have a workable narrative for our country. What is going to work? I would not hesitate to be given the opportunity to lead. After dialogue. Okay? But I'm saying we have already developed what is called a dialogue frameworking document, which is a document that informs the nature of dialogue so that we resolve this issue. What that transitional mechanism is going to do is to implement the framework of agreed positions. It is also to be a mechanism that defines the terms and details that have to be agreed, including when the elections are supposed to be held, which are free and fair. Once we have done that mechanism, agreed upon, endorsed by Zimbabweans, ZANU-PF and MDC in Parliament, that then kicks in a comprehensive reform agenda, which is item number 4. That's the 4th stage. Now, we all know what has to be done. The international community is aware of what has to be done and what needs to be done. Look at the report of the IRI and the NDI. Look at the Commonwealth report. Look at the European Union Observer Mission report, the SADC Observer Mission report, African Union report. They are all clear in terms of the catalogue of issues of what has to be done. Even if you look at Zidera, Zidera is actually supposed to give us an indication. Zidera is actually the aspirations of all Zimbabweans. What they want to see in democracy. That's how we must be looking at it. Let's implement those. And then go and say, we have implemented our own issues. Let's do business. You will see. But it all boils down to leadership. The humility and responsiveness. You can't have a country's name against Minister Awanikwi. No, I'm sorry. Just these simple words. One of and you don't have the humility to say, I'm sorry, before you even begin to move forward. No apology. Zamara disappears. No apology. People are killed in the politics. No apology. New dispensation. There can't be the new without the understanding of the apologies of the old. That's what moves the country forward. So, comprehensive reform agenda is very important. It is within our capacity to achieve. We have measures that we have to put in place to turn around and transform this beautiful country. Yes, they say, Middle East, they have oil, so we can't be like Middle Eastern countries because we have oil. Yes, they have oil in the Middle East, but we also have our soil here. Rich soils. Why can't we manipulate our soil, our agriculture, our flora, our fauna? Yes, what you that in 7 hubs. That will know 7 hubs. Number 1, agriculture hub, tourism hub, health hub, financial hub. Unaikanga Victoria Falls that in this. Las Vegas in Osara Pass. That's the vision. 7. And Japanese was that no but you know for it much. Tangane kumuswe. What no but I didn't kusungwa ngayo yakasungwa iyo yakabopwa muswe. We have a comprehensive raft of reforms. Dr. Mashakada mentioned most of them. Political and institutional reforms, nation building and national reconstruction. We don't have a nation, we have a country. A nation is about citizens who are above the political leaders. So that political leaders account to the citizens. When you see, not to respect this. Mukwasha ari kujiwa nembwa. Ndina hangu ndiri kujiwa nembwa. Taura kundiri kujiwa. The right to speak up. Stabilizing the economy, constitutional reforms, legal reforms, media reforms, electoral reforms. In fact, we have drafted a very comprehensive report, an alternative electoral bill. Not a Muppet show and mu parliament. Ne MOPA. MOPA is worse than POSA. We want a comprehensive, inclusive, agreed upon reform agenda. We have our own documents so that we are able to attend. Last but not least is the free and fair elections. After comprehensive electoral reforms, mutual agreed conditions, international supervision, a credible electoral board. It's true the Zeki Ripoi. Yanas like Wana, Siswangu Ichigumba. No. There will not be an election Muno Munyika under those people because they've shown that they have a credibility deficit. They are not honorable as citizens to run a credible election. So we have to have a proper, independent and credible electoral commission. And we're not joking on this. Trukutauraka, but chashika pakuita. So but not aura kuone sana kuti munhu wese aone trukufamba say. This is not a threat, it's a good promise to my brother E.T. Having said this, the stage you could resolve a crisis in Zimbabwe, in my stages, Mangani. What is number 1? Number 2? Number 3? Number 4? Number 5? Does it make sense to you? Are you willing to support this? Having said that, I want to take this pleasure, ladies and gentlemen, to say that, look, timing and strategy in any struggle is the preserve of your strategic unit. And the strategic unit is your leadership. Now, once you want to democratize strategy, it ceases to be strategy. It becomes foolishness. So we are very clear on when the struggle has to be executed to the benefit of our people. We will lead from the front. We will provide the necessary leadership. But it has to be done on our terms, our timing, not on the terms and timing of our opponent. Because we know what the opponent is planning. They are planning to do things that are wicked. But we want to minimize the effect of their wickedness so that we maximize the goodness of our strategies to achieve change for the people of Zimbabwe. Change is coming. Victory is certain. Thank you very much. God bless you. Having said that, I now want to take this opportunity to officially launch our Return to legitimacy, openness, and democracy document. This document, like I see all of you now have the copies, some are still receiving. Kana usiri MP hauna, usiri kansela hauna, saka ziyapa unokwana. Aiwari kuya ma document, but this is our document. This is our reload for the goodness of our country, for the blessing of our land, and for the peace and harmony in our country. We must unite to build a great country. Zimbabwe shall be great. Zimbabwe shall be free. Zimbabwe shall be democratic. May God bless you. I officially declare the document reloaded and our struggle reloaded. Hooray! Thank you very much. God bless you. Thank you.
Thank you very much to our President, Advocate Nelson Chamisa, for launching the Reload Policy document. Tisingapedze nguva toda kusiya nguva kuna Honorable Miriam Mushai, who's going to give us the vote of thanks. Please let's give her a huge round of applause.
Director of Ceremonies, Advocate Fazai Mahere, thank you very much. I will start off by acknowledging and thanking the President of the MDC, Advocate Nelson Chamisa. Thank you very much. President Chamisa, thank you so much for gracing the occasion. We thank you once more. Thank you so much for launching the Zimbabwe's roadmap to economic recovery, legitimacy, openness, and democracy. Thank you so much. President Chamisa, thank you so much for providing visionary and competent leadership to the people of Zimbabwe and the MDC. We thank you. I'll also take this opportunity to acknowledge Vice President Honorable BT and the Standing Committee. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, all the Standing Committee members, the National Executive members, for gracing this occasion. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, members of Parliament of the MDC, for gracing the occasion. I also want to take this opportunity to thank members of the Diplomatic Corps, members of the media, members of the embassies and civic society that are here present. Thank you very much for gracing the occasion. I would want to take this opportunity to thank the acting mayor, as well as the councillors who are gracing this occasion. Thank you so much. We feel greatly honored by the presence of our zones of autonomy. Thank you so much. I would also want to take this opportunity to thank the provinces that are here, Honorable Chikombo, the chairperson of Harare province, for hosting us. Thank you very much. I would also want to take this opportunity to thank the members of the districts, the members of the branches, and all the members that are here present. Thank you for gracing the occasion. We want to thank you. I would also want to take this opportunity to thank Honorable S.G. Wende and his team and the members of staff for putting this through. Thank you so much. Lastly, the take home for us is that under the able and competent as well as visionary leadership of President Advocate Nelson Chamisa, the MDC understands the plethora of the crises that are bedeviling this country. We have the solutions, and the solutions are captured in Reload, anchored on SMART. We have the direction, we have the solutions. Under the competent and able leadership of President Advocate Chamisa, we are ready to act, we are ready to govern, we have the answers, we have the solutions. Thank you very much. Go well, Jenny Messes. The Reload is here.
Before you go, thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you so much, Honorable Miriam Mushai. Just 3 things before we go. I'm going to call upon Honorable Morgan Komiti, who's going to give us the closing prayer. But before he does so, a few announcements. As we're all aware, Job Sikala has been incarcerated where? In Bikita. It's been announced that his remand date, his hearing, has been remanded to the 24th of July. He's in custody. Meaning as we speak. I'm also informed that there's going to be a bail application that's going to be lodged in respect of him tomorrow at the High Court in Masvingo High Court. So let's continue to offer our solidarity. Additionally, we all know that Gift Siziba or Comrade Ostalos is meant to appear before Rotten Row Court, I believe it is. The thing is, the state agents keep changing. You know, as lawyers, we all know that every person accused of any offense has got certain rights, but consistently the NPA and the police keep playing games, hide and seek games, I think the ZLHR call them. So we're always, you know, on our guard to check and make sure that our members of our party are safe. So when we raise the alarm, it's because we know the nature of the beast that we are dealing with. People have a constitutional right to free speech. People have a constitutional right to challenge the government. It's your right to challenge the government, President Chamisa, under Section 67 of the Constitution. So you cannot be incarcerated for exercising your constitutional rights. So obviously, as a party, we take huge exception to what we say are wrongful arrests and malicious prosecutions of our members. So, Honorable Komichi, please pray for us.
Pamusoro President Baba Chamisa noutungamiri wese wamunawo kumberi uku pamusoro imese mauya ngatinamatei kona nyadenga Mr. Baba ni mwanakomana mweya mutsvene zvaitika pano zvaitika nokuda kwenyu baba muri kudenga dururai Mwari Baba wisdom yamakapa Solomon mudurure mukuru wedu Baba Chamisa vatitungamirire mugodururawo muvatevedzi vavo vagovatevera nokuvateerera zvataurwa panapa Mwari Baba idocument redu romusangano renyika ino tinofanira kutibatsira kuti tisunungure nyika ino tipei simba Baba muri kudenga tikunde vanotirwisa imi Mwari Baba makarwa hondo pana David she wangu vavengi vake vanga vane simba guru vaigona kumukurira physically asi makaburuka muri pachenyu mukatonyera rehondo mukapfeka nguo dzehondo Baba ishe mukarwa David akakunda nasi Baba tinokunda ZANU-PF tinokunda munangarwa nokuda kwenyu Baba kuti nini muchatirwira in the name of Jesus Christ amen.
Tatenda maita basa mose nekuya. I think everyone's dismissed. Thank you very, very much.
Trust Farm. At last.
Yeah, 1, 2. One, two, 1, 2, 1, 2.
It helps you because you want a job, you want power, you want electricity, you want fuel, you want money in a bank. So the political crisis has to be resolved. So this reload answers the resolution of the political crisis arresting Zimbabwe. So it liberates you. It's a freedom charter, just like the freedom charter in South Africa written in the 50s was a roadmap for change in South Africa. Our reload is a roadmap for change in Zimbabwe. Let's democratically fight. Let's democratically talk. Let's democratically work together. Let's democratically implement reforms. Let's democratically have a democratic election. Those are the 5 things.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Where's your my phone? It's already live. It's alive.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us today. Maybe quickly for our viewers' sake, for the benefit of our viewers, can you just tell us how the reload document is going to assist fellow Zimbabweans out there?
Yeah, the reload document is to unlock our roadmap to economic recovery, restoration of legitimacy and democracy in Zimbabwe. So this is our benchmark document to secure dialogue in order to rescue the country from its economic and political crisis. So instead of just talking the air, this is a document which has got the substance of what we stand for, what we want to achieve, and what we want to see happen in Zimbabwe, from the economic, political, electoral, and governance sector. So this is a clear framework of how we want to resolve the economic impasse that we're into.
Okay, as a clear roadmap of where you want to go as a party, is there any action, because I believe even people on social media have raised their concerns, is there any action as the party that they want to do with regards to the economic situation that is
demand dialogue and the resolution of the crisis in Zimbabwe. We have got a duty to make sure that the decline, the suffering of the people is stopped, that Zimbabwe can move forward again. So, resort to those peaceful demonstrations.
Thank you very much for your time. Thank you.
Is HDMI on now? Is HDMI ready? Yes. It's my mic.
Secretary General, Honorable Consilia. Thank you so much, Honorable, for being with us. Let me just place So, you've experienced the launch of the women in Zimbabwe?
Reload for the women of Zimbabwe means hope. We have been strangled for a long time, we have been stifled, we have suffered. This nation is in fact bleeding, and those wounds need healing. The reload gives us hope that there will be sanitization one day in the future. We have expectations. If there is talk, there is dialogue, if there is reform, then we look forward for better things in this nation.
So, someone at home right now who's asking themselves a question that is reload really going to change my life in other Zimbabweans? How is it going to impact someone who's at home?
The people of Zimbabwe have suffered because of mismanagement. So we're hoping that when we reload, we look again into the people's plight, we reform. We have reformed towards what has gone wrong in this nation. If that is followed and with a political goodwill, then we will lead somewhere. Yes, it means all those players around accept that we have gone wrong. Everything has gone wrong in this nation. So if one does not accept that, then something is wrong with their mind. So if we accept that something has gone wrong, it has to be redirected. That's the use of reload. So it should give hope to the nation and the woman of Zimbabwe.
Thank you so much, Honorable Consilia. Thank you for your time. And I hope that everyone at home who's watching everywhere around the country have a gist of what reload is. Reload. If it's visible or if it's not, just tell us your thoughts.
Yes, I can hear you loud and clear. You have switched it off.
Right.
Is one last person coming in?
Sorry guys, are you live?
Yep.
Right now.
Okay, sorry about that. Yeah.
We're back again, and joining me here is the MDC Secretary for Education, Sports and Culture, Thank you so much, Fati, for your time.
Thank you for having me.
I think people want to know, just briefly, the key components of the reload document.
I think the key components are firstly the realization that the country is in a state of crisis, and the movement for democratic change as a government in waiting really needs to offer an alternative policy. The center of the document is alternative policy formulation. There is a large section devoted to political and economic reform. There is a reference to the fact that ultimately we're going to need a free and fair election, but leading up to that we're going to need a political pressure, dialogue with the current government to ensure that we really pave the way for not only a democratic transition in Zimbabwe, but a complete overhaul of the national psyche and our approach to the foundations of nation building. So there's a lot in the document on the question of reforms, reforming our institutions, all the key institutions, both constitutional and not, trying to ensure that they're independent and execute their constitutional mandate, legislative reform, ensuring that laws are aligned to the constitution, and just reforming the entire manner in which government is done in Zimbabwe.
Okay, so if I understand properly, the reload document is more of a transition. It's a document that will from this point forward to a Zimbabwe that the MDC is hoping to see one day.
So you'll be aware, that's correct, but just to add that, you'll be aware that prior to the 2018 election, the Movement for Democratic Change launched the SMART document, which spoke in great depth about the sort of economic fundamentals that need to be addressed before we can, you know, go forward as a country, and what we would do if we were in government. So all that Reload does is add to that conversation to ensure especially that the question of reforms is addressed, and also articulating the prerequisites of dialogue. So I think the word dialogue has been bandied about a lot in our political space, but the document specifically addresses the nature of dialogue that is required in order to take the country forward. The fact that there needs to be a neutral arbiter, there needs to be an underwriting of the process by the international community and other key independent stakeholders. The fact that both the current government and the MDC have to be open to a rigorous debate about some of the key issues, and I think there remain concerns about the outcome of the 2018 election, all of which need to be reformed, and that's dealt with extensively in the electoral reform section of the Reload document.
Okay. Last election you ran as an independent candidate, and in this year you joined the MDC.
Yes.
So maybe what prompted you to join from an independent candidate to going?
It's a good question that I get asked all the time.
Yes.
I think the key thing is consistently from my entry into politics, I've always articulated the need for a strong, united opposition, and we did try to join hands with the MDC alliance prior to the election, but I guess as a matter of politics, it was premature. But I think after the electoral process, I sat down with both President Chamisa and other stakeholders in the party and with my own team and said, look, at the end of the day, our objective is the same. Our objective is to win Zimbabwe for change, to ensure that this country can get back to a place where freedom, fairness, opportunity, social democracy are recognized and become the daily bread of every Zimbabwean, including the common man. And with that objective in mind, we all it's necessary to join hands with everyone else, put egos, personalities, differences of opinion aside, and work together towards this common goal. And I think that explains joining the MDC. I'm looking forward to it. I've had a very warm welcome from all the party members, and I really look forward not only to fighting for all the things that we believe are important as Zimbabweans, but also joining together and collaborating with a team of like-minded people in a party whose model and whose fundamentals are similar to the ideals that I choose to live by myself: integrity, professionalism, democracy, freedom, fairness, and opportunity.
Okay, so at this point, maybe fast forwarding a little bit, at this point Zimbabweans want action. So what is your stand as the party with regards to, things are not okay, the economy is in shambles as we speak. So what
That's a great question. I love that it's coming from a young person as well. I think President Chamisa addressed it in his presentation today, that it's not just a question of taking to the street and tearing down every single building. You cannot protest without any strategy in place. So the key thing is to have a clear objective for whatever protest or action that's going to be taken. Exhaust all other, dialogue and all other possibilities before you take, millions of people onto the street. Because once that signal is given, just to use the language of the youth wing, once a signal is given, it's very difficult to reverse. And we must also be careful because we're dealing with a ruthless machinery. I and a number of other Zimbabweans don't think another life should be lost to this regime, and we saw what happened in January. So we don't want a situation where we protest, we go out onto the street, people lose their lives, and we gain nothing from it. Because remember, what that does for the regime is that becomes the story. The fact that they were looters, even though they were planted and it's not our people. So there's a need to upgrade the strategy from what we saw in January to something that can actually achieve a tangible outcome. Because I'm sure you can agree that it's not just noise that we want. We want noise or action that's accompanied with results, and results that are ultimately good for the entire nation. So I think as a party, like everyone else, we are mounting as much political pressure as we can on the government and we want to ensure that we've exhausted dialogue. We've exhausted every other means of trying to resolve the political impasse before we put people onto the street. And once that's done, you know, I'm sure everybody knows what is possible to happen. But I think at the core of everything that the movement for democratic change does is the need for an adherence to constitutionalism. So peaceful protest will be the heartthrob of any protest that we engage in, and you know, whatever overthrow or change in government has to be consistent with the Constitution.
Okay, so taking that